everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, my guest is Kiran Handa Gaudioso. Kiran is the CEO of the United Way of Northern New Jersey and president of United for ALICE, which stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. She has a long list of accolades in the work she has done in both New Jersey and New York. We start off talking about boxes to check when it comes to ethnicity, as Kiran was born to a dad who is from India and a mom who is Irish and grew up in New Jersey. Early in Kiran's career as a policy advisor under former Governor Florio in the New Jersey Governor's Office of Volunteerism, Kiran was instrumental in establishing AmeriCorps in New Jersey. At the United Way, Kiran oversees an annual budget of $8.2 million and a staff team of 50. She was asked by Governor Murphy to co-chair the Third Sector Advisory Council to work with public sector leaders across the state to develop relief, recovery, and reimagination strategies to support ALICE. During this episode, Kiran and I talk about many different topics, including the evolution of her career, the continued passion she has for the incredible work she is doing to help the underserved in New Jersey, current events, the stress of being a working parent, and the importance of focusing on grace. Please subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Stream this podcast on all streaming sites. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. I am the CEO and co-founder of the Zach G. Applaud Kids Foundation, connecting children and young adults ages 7 to 22 who meet the financial needs requirements with ongoing lessons in dance, acting, instrumental music, and vocal instruction. For more information, visit applaudourkids.org. And for more information about Today is the Day and this podcast, visit todayisthedayliveit.com. The views expressed by all Today's the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and every week, as I always say, I get to interview the most incredible humans who are making a difference in their corner of the world and beyond. And today, I have Kiran Handa Gaudioso. Kiran, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jody. So good to see you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, it's so good to see you, and thank you for being a part of this. After I'm going to read some of your bio. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's incredible. It's an incredible bio, but I'm going to read a part of it as I always do. It's an incredible words on paper. So Kiran was named Chief Executive Officer of the United Way of Northern New Jersey and President of United for ALICE, effective March 2020. She has served as Chief Operating Officer since 2017, following 4 years as the organization's Senior Vice President of Community Impact and Community Relations. Kiran oversees an annual budget of $8.2 million and a staff team of 50. And over the past year, she led the establishment of the ALICE Recovery Fund and the creation of an innovative child care pilot, United in Care. She was asked by Governor Murphy to co-chair the Third Sector Advisory Council to work with public sector leaders across the state to develop relief, recovery, and reimagination strategies to support ALICE. Prior to joining the United Way, Kiran served as interim CEO and vice president of program operations in New Jersey After 3, the public-private partnership that worked to provide safe, quality after-school and expanded learning time programs for 15,000 public school students in New Jersey. And during her 9 years with New Jersey After 3, Kiran created and managed a professional development system for 6,000 after-school program directors, site managers, and staff. Early in her career as a policy advisor under former Governor Florio in New Jersey Governor's Office of Volunteerism, Kiran was instrumental in establishing AmeriCorps in New Jersey. She received her bachelor's in political science and policy studies from the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. She received a fellowship to attend the Eagleton Institute of Public Affairs at Rutgers University, earning her a master's in political science. So Kiran, I ask everybody this question too, and you know I ask everybody an end question, but the beginning question is now turned out to be, how does it feel to hear all those things? Because I feel like, and there was more, and I just sharing that out loud and getting the reaction from my guests on how it feels to hear that back.
Thank you, Jody. Those words, yes, hearing them out loud coming out of your mouth is always different than, writing it or reading it. And it just makes me feel very blessed. I first of all, I can't believe I've been at this for 25 years. The time just goes by so quickly. I still feel like, that young kid coming out of graduate school with all these ideas and hopes and interests. So I can't believe the time, but I also just feel so grateful. And I I think about all of the people that I've been able to work with and interact with, and the families and the children. It's kind of like a video reel in my mind when, I heard you talking of the folks that have just been, next to me, with me, and part of my work community.
I like that, a video reel in your mind. That's a great way to put it, because you could remember certain things that stand out as a portion of what I've read, and that makes perfect sense. I often feel like when we're putting our bios together, we really don't realize the impact we have made, because it's words on a page, and I don't know about you, but it's one of the things I hate the most is trying to put my accomplishments down on paper. It just feels strange. But it is incredible, and I want to get into the work you do. But before we get to that, I want to talk about you years ago, where you grew up and what type of child you were. And so let's start with that, and then we'll move forward after that.
Sure. So I am truly a Jersey girl. I was born in Denville, moved shortly after that to Middlesex, in a small town in Middlesex County, right in between Bound Brook and Denellen. I grew up there, went to high school in Somerset County. I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and then from there went on to study at Syracuse and then come back to New Jersey. I was really fortunate to have a lot of roots and family and good friends to bring me back here, and the opportunity to kind of build a career here and New York. I've also worked in New York City as well, which has been terrific and a really nice kind of different view, but really critical. So I'm a Jersey girl, proud of it, love our state.
Me too. I wasn't originally born in New Jersey, but I'm definitely a transplant that loves the state. That's for sure. So as a child, were you young? Were you outgoing? Were you the class clown? How would you characterize yourself?
I think I'm definitely was very outgoing. Not a class clown. I think rule follower. I'm a firstborn in my parents, in our sibling order. And so I'm a rule follower. But definitely outgoing, definitely chatty. Definitely always getting the tap on the shoulder, from the teacher when in grade school to kind of refocus and stop whispering or, passing notes, things like that. So I would say very friendly, always kind of in the know, wanting to see what was going on. Very social, coming up in middle school and high school, all about kind of the weekend plans and what are we doing and where are we going and all of that. So yeah, I would say it's pretty outgoing, but I have definitely a quiet side to me. I'm very, I like to kind of pull back at times and do a lot of journaling and reflecting and thinking. And so I probably didn't do that as a child, but I know my mom has often said, there were times where I would be busy and running around or even come home from school and then, need to just kind of sit on the couch and read and kind of unplug. Definitely need that. And I need it very much today for sure.
I think, as we get older, we can characterize ourselves as extroverts, introverts. And I've had some of these podcasts where some of us have said, and I know I'm an extrovert introvert, right? I still need that time like you. I love being around people, but also need that time to fill the bucket again, right? Get that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Before we started the podcast, you and I always have the best conversations, even right before the podcast. I wish I hit record sometimes. But we were talking a little bit about, growing up. And unfortunately, there are times when you're growing up and you're not being treated so well as a child, right? Because kids can be cruel at times. Adults can be cruel at times too, obviously. But I was explaining to you that saying your name correctly is so important to me because I was made fun of growing up with my last name being Grinwald. They always tried to say, Griswold, from, the Vacation series, the movie. And I was tortured with that. And then you brought up that you knew how I felt. And I looked at your name so many times thinking to myself, where, how? And I said, and that's when I said to you, can we share that on the podcast? Because it's incredible what a child's mind, what, children thought of with your name. Would you please share that? And I appreciate you sharing it.
Sure. No, thank you so much. Just a little bit of background on my name. So my parents are an interesting couple. I'm first generation on my father's side. He came to the United States in the mid 60s from India to study and advance his education, like thousands of Indians, engineers and doctors in the 60s came to New Jersey, and with the intention of going back and following, kind of the marriage rules and bringing, support and resources to his family. While he was here, he met my mother, who is Irish and grew up in Newark on Godhard Street in the Irish section. Very, very humble beginnings. And they met, got engaged, got married, and had a baby in 14 months. And that baby was me. So, in the 1970, that was not very common. And so my parents, were in a mixed marriage, for lack of a better word. And that very much has impacted me as an individual and my identity, how I identify. I often say growing up, and as I got older, I never really knew what box to check, because I didn't have a typical upbringing of being one particular identity or ethnicity. But I also, grew up in a predominantly white community where there wasn't a lot of mixed families at the time. But I had a lot of the benefits and what we kind of talk about now in terms of white privilege was very much a part of my upbringing. But I also have a side where, I think about the early years of my parents' relationship and looking back in our family life where things were, we slept with winter coats because the heat wasn't on, and we would eat the same thing for 10 days because that's what my mom was able to source. And my dad worked 60, 70 hours a week. We would go times without seeing him. And so all of those things that I never thought about growing up because I had a home and safety and love and support and always had basic things. But I do understand and very much now our work around Alice, what that is like coming up from that perspective. So the long story short around that is that my name, kind of growing up in that typical kind of community, was not very common and was unusual. And my name is Indian. It's really, it's Hindi, and it's in Sanskrit, it means beam of light. And it's also Irish. That's not the way I spell it. I have two cousins named Kiran in Ireland, but in Gaelic, it means precious little dark one. And so my parents intentionally chose that name. And so I really love my name. But as a child, it was definitely a source of confusion and an opportunity to just, kind of normal playground antics of being made fun of. And it wasn't just, the name, but it was who I was, really, because I wasn't like all the other kids. So anyway, that's really just what I was mentioning to you and kind of the association around my name. And we were in the middle of the Iran-Iraq war, and when I was in middle school, so there was a lot of confusion, like, is it Kiran, Chirac, all that kind of stuff. And I remember it. I vividly remember it.
It is, and that's why I was stunned when you shared that with me, because I would have never thought that they could do that with your name. And also you bring up such an important point in the world we're in right now. So many of us really don't know, right, what others have been through, because for me, my growing up was everybody's the same. That was the way I was brought up. Nobody's different, doesn't matter. Color doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter. Religion. We were brought up, which sounds great because you're treating everybody equal, but you're not also knowing what others are going through. You're not identifying that there are problems out there. And we were not brought up that way, that, hey, yes, everybody's equal, but know that life is a struggle for other people. You're privileged. You know what I mean? You're privileged and you don't realize it. And so there's this whole relearning for so many of us, educated people, uneducated, everybody's getting this relearning. But I think sharing these types of stories, Kiran, is so important because we need to continue to keep things to light. And I know through the work you're doing that as well. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. Thank you for asking. I think it's really important, as especially those of us that are fortunate enough to be in leadership roles, to talk about our background and talk about those early struggles and talk about that questioning and how you've come at this age, to talk about it and explain it and understand who you are, especially organizations like ours that are so committed to equity and understanding that Black and brown households have had disproportionate, pervasive racial and economic injustices for, very, very long time. And as a leader, I've often kind of shied away from sharing about my background because I know that I have had a lot more privilege and that I look white, and that oftentimes I married an Italian, so everyone assumes I'm Italian and I have dark hair and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm very much aware of that. But on the same side, I understand, and I did have my own experience that has a lot of parallels to a lot of my colleagues and friends that have really grown up with significant systemic inherent racism experiences on a daily basis. So I used to kind of shy away because I felt like I don't deserve to be in that conversation. And now I'm at a place where I acknowledge that I am not the same as your experience. To your point, we all have different experiences, but I do have an experience and I do want to talk about it. And it really speaks to the notion and the concepts around intersectionality and the fact that, so many of us wear so many different hats and have so many different perspectives, especially in a state like ours, which is one of the things I love about our state. But it's just, we have to talk about it, and we have to seek to understand and to hear each other.
Absolutely. You talked about what box to check. And I think that's a very interesting thing. So, obviously I'm white, but the father of my children is Brazilian. And so he's always, for whatever reason, his family, he's first generation here. He always put Caucasian for whatever reason on the form. And my kids are the ones who said, no, that's not the right answer.
Yes.
And how interesting is that? And I don't mind admitting that because we have ignorance. Some of us are just ignorant to it. It's not we're stupid. It's not we're dumb. It's just that we are not necessarily always paying attention. And that's that relearning piece. And that's why I agree with you. As leaders in the community, sharing your stories helps other people learn what they can do and what they should be doing better, right? Because we all learn from each other. So I want to go back to talk about, and start out with the nonprofit work that you've been doing. So obviously you went to school and we talked about, I mentioned the colleges and the master's degree and all of that. But before we get there, just a quick question for you is, what did you think you were going to be doing when you grew up?
I know I was thinking about this question this morning when I was swimming in the pool, but I have to say to you, Jody, I really didn't have a plan. I just always gravitated to doing community service or volunteering, being active in nonprofits, just connecting to kind of the nimbleness and the opportunity to be engaged in community. That was always something. I volunteered through high school and college a lot, and had a lot of internships around that kind of in the nonprofit sector, but I didn't have a plan. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I just knew that I just needed to work hard, meet as many people as I can, and really look for opportunities and experiences that I enjoyed and that I felt good about and I felt like I could contribute to. So, I get that a lot of times young people today will ask, what was your plan? How did you get to where you are? I didn't have a plan. My plan was literally just do the best job I can, meet as many people, and try to have impact. That was the plan.
So did nonprofit find you, or you found nonprofit?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate while at Eagleton to have an internship, as you mentioned, in human services under Governor Florio. And at that time, there was a lot of energy and activity happening around national service. And I had done a semester of service while I was in college. I did an alternative spring break. So I had done a lot of community service. And so when this started coming to the light in the human services and in the governor's office, literally President Clinton came to New Jersey at Rutgers Stadium in 1993 to announce the creation of AmeriCorps with Governor Florio. And I was the intern. And when I started saying to my supervisor and mentor, who I'm still very close with at the time, I think I might be able to offer some insight on this, and I think we can really make this happen in New Jersey. And so it was literally a moment of being in the right place at the right time, having something to offer, and being willing to do anything. Whether it was all the kind of the prep grunt work for any events, or literally writing a policy memo. And everything in between. And so that's kind of how that happened. And that sort of led me to meeting other folks and getting connected to other organizations. And that's really what launched my career. I ended up leaving state government, for kind of all the normal reasons, change of administration, things like that. But have always maintained really good relationships. And I think once you get into the nonprofit sector, it's very hard to leave. There are a lot of just so many benefits to the culture and the way we get to work and the people, and the opportunity to be nimble and flexible and innovative. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, I'm that's my background, nonprofit, and it does become a family. I feel like we talk a very different language almost as nonprofit professionals. We understand the hardship it takes to build a mission, to live in that mission, to fund the mission. It's all, it's something that's, I think, uniquely different. I've worked on both sides, for profit and nonprofit, and there is definitely a difference between the two, without a doubt. I'm on this mission, Kiran, to really call nonprofits for impact organizations, as I know that I mentioned to you. And I don't own it. As Simon Sinek put this out, and I love him and I love his work. And when I listened, I said, this sounds important. So I ask a lot of my nonprofit guests this question: what are your thoughts about the sector being the only sector that identifies as what the IRS identifies them as?
I mean, Jody, excuse me, I love that suggestion. And I too am a big fan of Simon Sinek. I think he's got really incredible insights and framing for us. And yes, it should not be called nonprofit. It doesn't really explain what we do. It implies that we'd be running at a deficit as an organization, which is certainly not how we want to be functioning. I really appreciate that framing around for impact, because that's what it's about. It's 100% around impact.
And that's why I asked this question, and I bring this up because I know when I talk to leaders like yourself, if we all work together to change it, that's the only way change is made. And also nonprofits, when you're going and talking to for-profits, they know you're coming for money, right? They know that that's the reason. And I think the conversation changes even when the framing changes.
I would agree. Absolutely. It just opens the door to have a conversation around, what, especially your example of sitting with a funder or a donor, what kind of impact can we do together? And how is that corporate partner or individual investing in that impact? It really frames things very differently.
And I think it makes the relationship less transactional, for sure. And it's more of that's what it is. It's a ongoing relationship, which is what it needs to be when we talk with funders. So you did incredible work in AmeriCorps, obviously, launching it. It's running, it's strong. It's amazing what you've built and how it continues. And then tell us about the journey from there.
So like I said, had an opportunity to lean into the nonprofit sector, kind of leaving the governor's office and human services. And a good friend of mine stayed, Mark Valley, who I know you've interviewed. And Mark ended up working for the Commission on National and Community Service, along with a longtime dear friend and colleague, Rowena Madden, who's still there in that space. Rowena.
I love Rowena.
Yep. So we were that little trio for a bit, and then I, decided to move on for all the reasons that happen. And so I started working for a really small organization called Jersey Cares, which is now a large organization. Brian is the CEO there, but I was the first executive director that board had hired, and really transitioning from a board-led to a staff-led organization. And then from there, spent some time with good friend Bob Garashi, who's the founder and CEO of NJCDC in Paterson. Really cut my teeth in community development there. Spent a lot of time in community, working with the faith-based community, bringing in corporate donors, corporate volunteers into Paterson who hadn't come into that city for a very long time. and then also helping to lift up their AmeriCorps grant on the ground. And then had a chance to work for an organization in New York City called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. Did a long stint there, really ran their mentoring, volunteerism, and enrichment programs. SEO is what it's called informally. Sponsors for Educational Opportunity runs a 6-year academic remediation mentoring program for young people of color from disenfranchised communities throughout New York City. So I worked in Bed-Stuy, Harlem, the Bronx, and we brought them all to a center in Manhattan 4 days a week for intensive supports. So that was an incredible experience, a lot of time with families and working with young people directly and building out a staff team. So it was a great experience and really got to understand how to raise money in that kind of community. Very different raising money in New York than raising money in New Jersey. In terms of your scope and your target audience and potential donor base. So that was a fantastic experience. And then, it took about 2 years off. I have 2 kids and that was some time to kind of, get them sleeping again and sort it out. And then NJ After 3 was born, and Governor McGreevey, reached out to Mark and I and asked us if we'd be willing to kind of create and help found NJ After 3 on the ground in 2004. And then you talked about the success of NJ After 3 and the incredible contributions in the out of school time early learning space. And that brought me to United Way in 2013, when unfortunately we had to shut down NJ After 3 during the Christie administration. So it was a time of transition, a first in my career, hopefully first and only time I have to shut an organization down. But I've been at United Way for 8 years. And really what brought me here was the commitment to Alice and to really seeing a community of folks who are not often seen and often forgotten, and really identifying with this opportunity around taking action and data and research and analytics and using that to help drive impact, your word, and really build local impact and local supports for Alice families. So that's really what brought me here. And it's been quite a journey. Really never thought I'd work at United Way. Just wasn't a place where I thought I'd end up, but really appreciate, the broader network of United Ways and the chance to be a local organization and very much in the mix and on the ground in New Jersey, but then also run a national research project and get to work with partners across 24 other states. So it's really an amazing gift to lead this organization, and I'm so grateful every day.
That's awesome. I think gratitude always brings more abundance. So I can definitely feel how grateful you are. But I don't think everybody knows what Alice stands for and what Alice does. So can you share more about that? Because I know even myself, I absolutely knew, but when I first heard of Alice, what does it mean and what does it stand for?
Yeah, so real quick, background, United Way of Northern New Jersey really wanted, going back 10 plus years, really wanted to take a hard look at what was going on in the community relative to need. Understanding that, Morris County, Somerset County, very wealthy communities, but knowing that seniors were spending more than half their income on housing, that childcare for 2 children was, over $2,000 a month for a family, knowing so that, basic costs of living were astronomical, wages were stagnating or, around minimum wage, and that there were high numbers of folks who weren't considered living at the poverty level, which is one national number, $25,000 for a family of 4, no matter where you live. But there were folks that were, probably weren't making just above that, but still and struggling every single week to pay bills and really living, in a chronic state of financial stress. So the Alice Project was born in an attempt to answer that question. And Alice stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. And it represents nearly 38% of households across the state of New Jersey who are struggling, working, but at the end of the week still can't necessarily pay all their bills and are very much at risk if, one crisis away from becoming living in poverty and struggling really poor. So Alice is, during the pandemic, everyone knows who Alice is now. Alice is that essential worker. Alice is, the intake person when you come into the hospital. Alice is in the grocery stores. Alice is the childcare worker, the nursing home support worker. It's all of those folks that are wage workers, typically, often working, we estimate 2.5 jobs. Usually it's a combination of jobs. And really they are absolutely critical. Alice did not get the privilege to work from home during this pandemic. Alice showed up every day, all day, made compromising decisions for their family so that they could work. We have a lot of data and research that shows that out of that 38% of households in New Jersey who are Alice, over 60% are Black and Brown households. And so we know that there is a disproportionate number of Alice households who are affected by being Black and Brown. So there's a lot of work that we do around lifting up all the inequity that is really behind the Alice and Alice family.
How can people help?
That's a great question. So there are lots of ways, I would say, United Way, we talk about 3 things: give, advocate, and volunteer. And so there are lots of ways that folks can plug in with us. Obviously, making a financial contribution is always a good way to start and can be done very easily on our website. A lot of times folks are interested in giving a gift towards something very specific, which we appreciate and love and do a lot of that stewardship. Or obviously general operating support goes a long way too, because we know what it takes to keep an organization running. The other piece around volunteering, we have a wide range of volunteer opportunities. We have, kind of the one times that happen. Typically, we have Tools for Schools, the backpack program for kids coming back to school. We do something around the holidays called Gifts of the Season. We do a food stock drive every summer. So there's a spring into summer. We have a number of volunteer groups to get involved with. We have something called Women United, which is our women philanthropy group that does a lot of intense volunteer work. We have a student group called the Varsity Letter Program, where we partner with high schools that offer community service opportunities to support United Way and other organizations. And the students actually earn a varsity letter, similar to a sport or a band program. So it's something that we're really excited about. We have it about 10 high schools. So lots of ways to get involved. Then we also have the more kind of skills-based volunteering, where we have a lot of volunteers that are tied directly to our work. So you mentioned we created during the pandemic the Alice Recovery Fund, which is now a permanent part of our organization, where we were able to raise almost $2 million and support almost 900 families with direct emergency cash assistance. And that's really the one element of the fund. But from a volunteer perspective, we have what's called an oversight committee that works with our staff to review the applications, ensure eligibility, verify all of the documentation, and then provide oversight for the cash grants that are made to the families. So we have a lot of skills-based volunteering as well, and that's just one example. And then the last piece is advocacy. Advocating for Alice from a public policy perspective and looking for ways to raise your voice, either through any petition or a call to a legislator, or sharing out kind of why you act for Alice on our website. All of those things really help raise awareness and really bring attention to the specific public policy strategies that help Alice families, especially in the long term.
What's the website, Kiran?
So it's United Way, NNJ.org.
And remember that extra N, because I didn't. And so it's important you remember that extra N, NNJ.org.
Yes.
So it's incredible. I mean, such a great career path that you've had. And you did mention something that I always like to mention on the podcast early in what you said about mentorship. And I'm a big advocate for it. So it sounds like you had some mentorship. And now in the role that you're in, you're providing that through your organization. But what are your thoughts on mentorship? And, for me, I have mentors now. I don't care what age I am. I feel like we always need mentors. And you and I are pretty much the same age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Especially in this role, and as you evolve in your career, you need to maintain those mentors that have been with you for a long time. And then I recently have, connected with one or two folks who are doing some mentoring with me and coaching with me in this role, because there's a lot that you need to kind of think about, and it's so helpful to have an external person, be there for you to listen. So, but in terms of mentorship, I agree with you, Jody. It's so critical, and it's something that we recommend. And I always talk about whether you have to have a mentor, you have to have someone that is thinking about kind of your career and your personal development with you, and be able to take a step back. I try to do as much kind of informal mentoring with staff as much as possible. I think, it was a little easier when we were not all working remotely to have those kind of informal check-ins and conversations. But I've been, just in the month of September, really kicked off a series of one-on-one meetings with our entire staff, every single person for 30 minutes. And with no agenda. It's just, how are you? How are things going? Tell me about your family. What are you thinking about? How's your job going? Just in general, a check-in, and how can I support you? And hopefully, I think that those conversations go a long way as well.
Yeah, I'm running some different things for different organizations and trying to keep their staff feeling connected, because it's hard with virtual, and everybody's tired of Zoom, and people are shutting off their cameras. And if you could when you show up in person at a meeting, you're in person, you can't cover your face. And it's the same thing now with this virtual life that we lead. But again, keeping our teams motivated and feeling connected is hard, but we have to do it. It's really important, for sure.
Exactly.
So if I were to ask you, which I'm going to ask you, out of all the work that you've done, biggest challenge for you that you overcame that you could share a story about?
From an organizational perspective or personal perspective, or?
I'm going to leave that either one, or you could do one of each. Totally up to you.
I think what came first to mind when you asked that question, just in our sector, is oftentimes, two things. It's raising money in an ever-changing environment and shifts that we don't necessarily have input in. Is probably the hardest thing from an organizational kind of operational perspective. Having to respond when you find out that a long-standing donor supporter is stepping away for no reason other than something happening with that donor or organization, nothing to do with the work that's been happening or the partnership. And so that has been the biggest challenge. And I've had a lot of sleepless nights about just the lack of reliability and recurring revenue sources for an organization, both at United Way and certainly at New Jersey After 3. Many sleepless nights, and trying to navigate that and know that, you have to really take the long view, and you have to really stay very close to monitoring revenue and very much almost like on a weekly, monthly basis to see where the changes are. And then the flip of that is really what I love about my job is the outreach and the stewardship and the connectivity with donors and supporters, and really ensuring that people, have that touch and feel close to the organization and see their dollars and the impact of their dollars in the organization. So but I would say that's the fundraising challenge has been the hardest in my career.
Oh, I can totally relate 100% on the sleepless nights. And you're right. I think anybody in our sector, who's on the fundraising side or responsible for the funds coming in is very much thinks about this. And it happens all the time that one of your top funders, it's not about your program. It's about something else that happened in their world. And now that's why, right? They always say that expression, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's like, you can't just have that one contact at that one major funder. You need to have like 5 contacts just in case that person leaves, and also continue to build relationships with new funders.
Exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned, you asked me before, on the personal side or the professional side. So I actually am going to put it back for a minute, because I think it's important, and as long as you're okay with answering this, is that as women with children, as you mentioned, and as a leader, we do have challenges. I mean, and I'm not saying, that our counterparts don't. I'm just saying that we do, and we can relate to that and identify with that. I work with a lot of women leadership groups and things like that. What would you say would be your, as on the personal side, biggest challenge?
I think realizing someone gave me very good advice, early on, two pieces of advice that was very, very helpful. Just realizing that you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. And that it's okay that trying to keep every ball in the air and trying to keep home and children and marriage and work and friends, trying to keep all of that at 100% is not sustainable, is not going to work. So it's okay to prioritize, and it's okay to make sacrifices and really think about, kind of the long term and not, the immediate, and to really trust yourself, that it will work out, and that you whatever you do, whatever decisions you make, whether you don't have children and your career is your focus, or vice versa, or whatever that looks like, that ultimately you will be in the right place that you need to be ultimately. It's just, it's very challenging. And I think especially women coming up today, and then really have that pressure to feel like they have to do it all. And it's too much. It's really just too much. I'm very fortunate that I mentioned I was able to take a couple of years and really focus on my children and have a lot of flexibility when I did go back, so that I had my kids with me a lot, quite frankly, a lot. You mentioned that professional development for NJ After 3. My kids were with me all those weekend conferences, running them. We used to joke that my older son, Michael, could literally run a PowerPoint, and, my daughter could do registration, all of that kind of stuff. So I was really fortunate. And I think that's one of the other great things about our sector, is that most organizations tend to be very family focused and appreciate and understand that staff bring their whole self into their job. And by giving flexibility and openness around family, that goes a long way. So that would be kind of the one thing is you can't have it all at the same time, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, and that is such a great message. Tanuja Daney was on from the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and she said, perfection is not the goal.
That's right.
When we realize that, I think that takes the weight off of how many balls can you have juggling in the air and keep them going. I mean, we're not all magicians and jugglers, and we don't always do it well, and we have to be okay with that.
Right. That's really much better way of saying what I said. Perfection is definitely not the goal. I do think there's this inherent pressure, as a young woman, your career and your kids, and you're starting out and you're thinking, and you think you have this image of what it's supposed to be like. And if you're fortunate enough to have a good, strong partner with you, that's incredible, and not everyone does. So that's something to be appreciated. But I often say to our younger staff too, you are the mother, you are the primary caregiver, and I'm sure your partner is 100% there and with you and all of that. But at the end of the day, you're the mom, and you have to own that, and that is what you lead with, and that has to be your priority. And don't expect other things from your partner and your friends and your family, because it's you are the mother. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that was something my husband and I had to really kind of reflect on and think about. And, once I kind of got that into my head, I was like, okay, that is the way it is. As much as he's amazing and an incredible dad and hands-on and all of that, at the end of the day, it's going to be me making a lot of those on the spot decisions around doctor's appointments and, play dates and all the scheduling and all of that. So anyway.
Well, and it was society, right? So your kids are probably similarly around my age. The age of my kids are 19 and 23. So, I think it was society too back then too. I think things are changing. There's a little bit now. There wasn't paternity leave back then.
No.
Not even close. So it's a little bit of a different world, but I still agree. And the other thing is that I know that you and I can totally agree on this. Those 80-hour work weeks, because I know I had them, and I'm sure you had them. There were birthday parties we had to miss in way of at school, and being, class mom was not really, something that I could do often, and all of those kinds of things. The kids may not have understood it then, but now, now when they look back at all the events they were at, because my kids were at events at 3 a.m. putting together walks and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if your kids say it, but mine are like, wow, I'm glad I had that experience. They didn't appreciate it back then, waking up at 2 a.m., but.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I would completely agree. My kids are the same, that they loved it and it was really fun. And I think they are so appreciative where they are now, knowing that, they're both their parents really worked hard to make a life and support them and provide some opportunities otherwise. So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They're very proud, very excited.
I bring that up for all the moms who have that guilt of like what, and we all have it, that mom guilt, right? And so
we gotta get rid of that, Jody. We gotta get rid of that.
We do. I want to tell all the moms that are listening, no, it's going to be okay, right? Kiran, we could talk from experience.
Absolutely. Everyone will be fine. If you miss something, it's not the end of the world. Do not harbor that guilt. Focus on the time that you do have, and don't worry about the time that you don't, because you're doing what you need to do. Take care of your family. The guilt. Hate the guilt.
I know, me too. I don't know. It's kind of comes with the job description that they never gave us in that manual that we still don't have.
Right. True.
So I want to ask you the question I ask everybody. But before I do ask that question, is there any message, because it's very important that the messages from the organizations that my guests work for and our leaders for share. Is there anything else you want to share before I ask you our last question?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, right? We could have, as you and I said, I'd love to come back and really talk about Alice. But I would say, for anyone listening who anything I said about who Alice is, or the data that we capture and share, or the story of an Alice family, if any of that resonated, please reach out. We're always looking for partners. We're always looking to share information. We're always looking for ways to advance our work and our initiatives around supporting Alice. So really just always looking to partner. We have an initiative I'll just mention called the Alice Action Network that engages businesses who in most cases employ Alice or have Alice as clients to really think about how to create programs and policies that support Alice in the workplace. And so anyone in that space in particular who's interested in talking with us around how to really build a workforce, an Alice-friendly workforce, and company culture, we would love to talk further, because we're really building out this network of leaders. And we have a website with policies and suggestions and protocol all around how to support Alice in the workplace. So I'd love to just put that out there if we can.
Absolutely. And what is that website?
You can find it on the United Way NNJ site. Yes.
Wonderful. And that work is incredible. But also for those listening, don't just think about yourself, think about your network, because with nonprofits, it's all about not just you, the person listening, it's who's in your network that might have interests. So if there's someone in your network and it's not you, remember what Kiran is saying, and we're all about helping people make introductions whenever we can. So always feel free to reach out and I can help be the conduit to that. So that's not a problem at all. So last question, Kiran, if you knew then what you know now, what would that be?
Yeah, I so appreciate this question. And it's a little intimidating though, Jody, because you're writing a book.
I said, don't, I try not to tell people that, but then I'm like, okay, if people don't know, then they might not want to get it published. So I share it, but I say, don't rehearse it. Please just let it be, what it is.
The one thing that I really think a lot about, and I find myself saying kind of over and over again, especially the last year and a half. So I don't know that it's something I would, tell my future self or what I know back then, but it's something that I think is so important as we think about our work and a value is like, it goes back to that whole notion of yourself as a leader. There's so many decisions that organizations are making on a very daily basis, especially during the pandemic. And I often think that, we feel like we have to get it right the first time and we have to knock it out of the park every time, but that's not always doable. And so what I talk a lot about is, we make the best decision with the information we have at that point in time. And it really I say a lot to my staff, like, let's focus on the grace. Let's give ourselves grace in this moment, because we are going at 500 miles an hour. There are a million things happening. And right now, today, this is the best decision. That could change in 2 to 3 weeks or 6 months or whatever. So I think it's being nimble and flexible and acknowledging that, you do the best you can in that moment. And then that has to be good enough. And that's where we have to kind of continue to understand that our work, but to your point, we're not making widgets, we're not making pills, we're not able to, that's not our business model. Our business model is supporting families, and life is not perfect and life is messy. And so a lot of times we really need to think, and I think back on my career, that tenet, that concept has been really helpful.
I love what you said there, because of the fact, and I always love what everybody says at the end, because it's just, I learned so much as well, which is so good, but there's flexibility within the framework. And when we hold ourselves to that word perfection all the time, it is impossible to reach, because perfection is different for every single person.
Exactly.
So when you talk about grace, that's a wonderful word, not one that is used that often, believe it or not. I don't hear that word that often, but I love that word. And I think that is an incredible learning, and that you're sharing that with your team. Let's have grace in this moment. Let's know that it could be a different decision later on, but for today and where we are right now, this is the best decision. So many people think about the future and don't realize we don't even own that yet. That's part of my mantra that I end with in a moment here, is we don't even own that moment yet. So we don't know what that's going to look like. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate your perspective. Absolutely.
No, I appreciate your perspective. And what you said is true. I really want you to come back on. I want you to give an update, please. I'm excited about the launch of the summit. The first time we're going to be
Yes.
Changemakers Summit. More information is coming out, and I'm glad that you will be a part of it. I'm so happy about that. And anything else, please always share with us, and we'll put it out on our social media and share it with others.
Wonderful. Really appreciate your support and partnership. This has been great. This has been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun. And thank you for your leadership. I want you to know, all the things that you created have helped people exponentially. They need you. They need more. We need more people like you in the state. So thank you for the work that you do.
Right back at you, Jody.
Oh, thank you. Well, Kiran, thank you for your time. Please, everybody, go to the website one more time, Kiran, for the website for everyone.
UnitedWay, NNJ.org.
Awesome. All right, everybody, I'm going to say what I always say at the end of every podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what steps, small or large, are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next week at the Today is the Day Changemakers podcast. Bye.